Hello, I'm Janet Ayers, and in this segment we're going to talk about working together in a community. And there's many reasons why we come together to work in groups and organizations. One is to achieve important goals or issues that we feel help to make a better community. We also like to contribute our skills, our talents. We like to volunteer on things that we feel are important and make a difference. We also like to be with others. That social time is an important motivator. It's also a time when we can learn new things, and we learn more about ourselves in the process. But most importantly, we like to think that we can make a difference and have fun as we do that. There are many different types of groups that we work in a community context. Some are small committees, some may be task forces where we're charged with doing a specific job, maybe for local government, and sometimes in organizations, nonprofit organizations. Some of these groups may be short-term groups, others are ongoing, long-term. Some may be structured organizations such as a 501c3 or an informal group where we've come together to maybe fix up the park. Some of the tasks we undertake may be relatively simple, while others may be very complex, such as maybe looking at a comprehensive land use plan, zoning issues. Some of the groups we work with may be advisory, where we make recommendations back to a decision-making body. Other groups may in fact make the decision, what we call policy making. And some groups may be the group that gets things done. They're the ones that take the actions. Some groups may have a small number of members, while others may be quite large. There are a lot of advantages of working in groups. One is that when we work together, we can create more information, take a look at issues from broader perspectives. It is also what stimulates our creativity to think about what could be and come up with some new innovations. We can also learn how to be more effective in what we do when we work together. We can discover new things about ourselves. We can also have more satisfying experiences when we work with others. And probably most importantly, when we work in a group, it's a way to collectively bring together our resources. Resources being our time, our talents, our skills, and our financial resources in order to get jobs done. We also probably have experienced some disadvantages to working in groups. Sometimes groups can become too exclusive, and I hear this frequently in communities when I hear people say, well, it's the same group of people that's doing everything. That's telling me that group has become exclusive, and it's probably time to reach out to bring some new people on board. There can also be pressure to conform. Organizations that have been around for a long time and they have board members that very proudly say, I've served on this board for 30 years, also can be a disadvantage, and new people coming on board feel that they don't belong. So it's something to watch as we think about how to be more effective in serving on boards. We often have experienced individuals that dominate a bit too much, and there's a difference between leading and inspiring and having passion and enthusiasm to carry things on versus being caught up in the power that goes with being in a position for too long. We also know freeloaders, people that are parts of groups and they don't show up, or they don't carry through, what we call the freeloaders. And it also takes time. There's many demands on our time as volunteers particularly, and setting aside the time that it takes to do those things that we agree to do is sometimes a disadvantage in groups. So as we think about working with others, there's times to think about when is it not efficient or effective to work in a group. And these are some examples. When time is limited, We really need to move very quickly to take advantage of getting a grant or seizing a new opportunity. There may not be time to form a committee. We need to move forward and move forward quickly. So it may not make sense to work in a group. When it's not an efficient use of time, sometimes committees are formed for sometimes trivial things when an individual could do it just as efficiently and effectively. So we need to think about, when does it make sense to form a committee, or when does an individual just move forward with it? Sometimes if the issue is not very complex and multiple perspectives are not needed, why not have an individual just carry forward? So in other words, we form groups when multiple perspectives and different ways of thinking, when people need to have buy-in to an issue that they feel important, then we need to form a group. But if that's not the case, we need to use some common sense about the use of people's time. Also, if there is an unmanageable conflict that exists and people are not willing to sit down together to work it through, not a good time to form a group. And people aren't willing to be at the table together. So as we think about how to work more effectively in groups, it's important to keep in mind two major functions of groups. One of the things that groups are about is accomplishing goals or tasks. That's why groups are formed. It's what is to be done. The other important function of a group is about the relationships that exist between people and how people work together. So as we think about leadership in groups, these are the two things that a leader must hold simultaneously at all times. Are we accomplishing our goals in an effective, efficient way? And how are people working together in terms of the relationships? So we know there's several components of effective groups. And real quickly, I'll run through these. In terms of, is the group, is the purpose, the goal of the group clearly defined? Do members of the group know what their purpose is and how they're going to proceed in accomplishing it? Does each member know how they fit into accomplishing that goal? In other words, how are their skills and talents going to fit in to accomplishing those tasks? Do we have the right structure for the group? Do we have the right processes in place? And do we have the skills and knowledge that we need in order to do the job? So these are 5 major components for effective groups, and I'm going to talk about each of these just very briefly. Let's look first at the group's purpose or its goal. This is really the cement that brings people together initially and keeps them together as they do their work. This is also something that individuals know that they could not accomplish it on their own. The goal, the task is something where we need everybody's input. We need multiple ways of looking at this issue. We need people's different skills and talents and judgments and experiences in order to be successful. So in other words, that purpose is known to all of the group members, and all of the group members buy into that purpose. Now sometimes this is not known initially, and that group purpose has to be identified in those initial stages of that group formation. Important initially to forming a group and its success is going to be not only understanding the purpose, but the decision-making authority. Does the group have the authority to make decisions, or is the group an advisory committee? Or is the group an action group where they're actually expected to carry out on the actions? So the authority of the group also has to be clearly identified at the beginning. And each group member feels that they have something important that they can and want to contribute in terms of achieving that group's goals and purpose. Coming out of this is then a plan of how to proceed in terms of what is it that the group is doing, who is going to be doing what, by when, and what resources do we need in order to do our job. Now, this may seem, of course, a group's goals and purposes have to be clear, but oftentimes we make assumptions, or it may be clear to me when it's not clear to others. So this is part of the group's conversation very early on, and a group leader can facilitate this discussion to help the group gain the clarity that it needs in order to proceed. Because as we get into actually doing the work, if the purpose of the group isn't clear, we can actually be going at cross purposes. Group structure is another thing that needs to be considered early on, and this is how a group is organized to do its work. So in more formal groups, such as 501c3 organizations, is the group formally organized? And in volunteer not-for-profits in a community, a common way of organizing is by a 501c3. But there are many, many ways of organizing. Is there a board of directors who provides the policy direction for the organization? Are there officers? Are there committees? What are the committees charged to do? What are the various group roles that are needed in order to carry out the tasks of the group? And is the size of the group appropriate for the tasks? Group size does matter. And there's a trade-off between group size and being able to work efficiently. So this photograph is taken in a community forum where we wanted to have input from a large number of people. There were about 100 or so people at this meeting. But to work efficiently, we broke down into small groups to talk about specific issues. And those small groups then went on to form task forces that were small, that were able to move into the action stages. So as we think about member roles, each group member needs to be clear about what he or she has to offer the group. And this always makes people a little bit uncomfortable when I say this, but I think it's being very honest, and it's also recognizing our motivation as to why we're involved in the groups that we're involved in a community. What are the personal benefits that you derive? So this may be using your skills and talents, feeling that you're making a difference on some worthwhile community issue. It may be the social benefits and having fun, or all of those. But I think when we can recognize what we derive from being involved in the groups, it helps us to understand our motivation, and it helps us to build our commitment. It's also acknowledging what others bring to the group. And I'm emphasizing this because so frequently I run into individuals that want to do it all. Or they feel they're in charge and everything falls to him or her. That's a power play. And that really diminishes what others bring to the table. So I'm really emphasizing this because I think it's enabling others to also be leaders and to also bring what they have to the table, and really creating that we attitude rather than me attitude. So there are many, many things that when we are a member of a group, we can do to help a group accomplish its goals. When we generate ideas, or we offer information, when we seek to clarify goals or information, when we prepare for the work or actually do the work that we volunteer to do, when we help organize the group's thoughts or actions, or volunteer to take meetings, when we help plan for the next steps, when we help link concepts that have come out of the discussion together, attending to details, particularly if a group is brainstorming and we can offer details on exactly how might we go about doing that. When we help to get resources, particularly money, in order to get the job done. Obviously, completing what we say we are going to do, volunteering to do those tasks, are all things that help the group accomplish its goals. But there are also things that we can do to help the group build relationships. So while we help accomplish the group's tasks, we also need to be attentive to other members and building those relationships. So when we ask another group member questions, when we give them space to speak up, when we seek feedback about ourselves or about the group's actions, and sometimes maybe we have to give feedback to others, positive or negative. When we respect other people's contributions and acknowledge that, such as saying, Jean, that terrific idea you had about the scholarship fund really is meaningful, and I think it's something that our board needs to think seriously about. Listening to others to really understand what they're saying. Anytime that we cooperate with others to work together and support them in their ideas and their actions, and sometimes it means we have to compromise. Also encouraging others. And when you think about this, you know, getting those email messages or those thank you notes that say, I really appreciate this or that, that really helps each of us as we work together. Being conscious of how we communicate with each other and communicating clearly and openly, and being very careful not to start communicating with just a small segment, but on a board, on a committee, in an organization, being transparent in that communication so everyone is receiving the same information at the same time. Giving credit to others for what they have done all helps to build relationships. And unfortunately, we have all probably experienced disruptive actions, and if we were honest with ourselves, we probably have been disruptive ourselves. It's part of being human, but we need to be attentive to this. So when we're maybe too silent at a meeting, where we're not speaking up to share information, when in fact we should be sharing that information to help the group reach a decision, or when we seek the spotlight, or we're too dominating, sometimes too dominating not because of power, but because we just get so enthusiastic around an action. Or when we hold with information, this one's a big one. This is called hidden agendas. Or when we share information with just a couple of other people and not with the entire group. Ooh, ouch, watch out on this one. This is a real issue with me. This to me is an ethics issue, which I'm going to talk about in another video. This is also linked in with that remaining silent. And when I hear people saying, well, they didn't speak at the meeting, but they had all of these conversations out in the parking lot afterwards. Well, okay, that's fine if you're just sort of debriefing the meeting and making sense of it. But if you're sharing information and not coming forth with your thoughts, your opinions, and information that needs to be shared and brought into the discussion, careful on that. That's a real disruptive action to groups. Talking too much, not being aware of the airtime, or being overly critical. I want to make a distinction here, because sometimes people think that you can't share objections coming at issues from different points of view. So I think we need to sort out when we need to question the issue and come at the issue from different perspectives. We can be very critical of the issue. The difference here is not to be critical of the person. So I think we need to speak openly and honestly and question issues and go about critical thinking and problem solving, but we know where that line is between the issue and being critical of the person, him or herself. Not being interested. So sitting there and being on electronic devices, not engaged, very disruptive. Again, having a hidden agenda. Having a hidden agenda is the number one issue that I hear in organizations and groups that are not functioning well. Not listening, not asking questions of one another, or just not being engaged, not coming to meetings or consistently coming late or having to leave early. In other words, you're there for a short time but not really engaged in the meeting, not engaged with the issues, not really caring, I guess is another word of saying that. Lacking a sense of humor, having an ego that has to be constantly addressed, and not giving full attention to the meeting. In other words, okay folks, I'm over 50. This thing with electronic devices, I've got all of them. I like Facebook, I like all of that. But when I'm in a meeting, I give my full attention to the meeting and what we're discussing there, and I leave my electronic device shut off in my purse or leave it in the car. It's not part of the meeting. Maybe I'm showing my age, but a huge issue with me. And it is about engagement, and it is about group etiquette. Group member competencies. What do we need to know when we're a member of a group in order to get the job done? Well, I think this is something the group asks itself, and the leaders recognize that board training or committee training or task force training is a very important thing to think about. So if we're a group studying land use, we may need to go out and look at some land use patterns. Or if we're talking about changing zoning ordinances in terms of setbacks of animal agriculture facilities, maybe we need to go out into the community to see what 300 yards or 1,000 yards or whatever it might be actually looks like. Maybe we need some training. So thinking about what does the group need to know? What are the competencies they need to have to be able to be effective? And then seeking that training and building those competencies on any kind of a group. Not only is that rewarding for the group, but it helps it to achieve its goals more effectively. Group processes. This is a huge area. This is about how a group functions. So this is all about the expectations that the group has of each other. I'm a huge advocate for ground rules, particularly when a group is just coming together, to have some time spent on what do we expect of each other in terms of attendance, in terms of decision making, in terms of communication, in terms of who speaks to the news media, etc., etc., etc. Ground rules, I think, are very critical, particularly when you're dealing with a very complex and controversial issue. And you have to establish these at the beginning. You can't establish these in midstream. How do we identify goals? That could be part of the ground rules. How are we going to make decisions? By consensus or using some parliamentary procedure process? How is information going to be distributed? How are group records going to be maintained? How do group members communicate with each other? How do we communicate with the public? Is there a spokesperson for the group's activity? How does the group promote itself, and by what means? How are resources identified and obtained, and who's going to do this? How does the group deal with its disagreements and conflict? In other words, is it okay for group members to disagree with each other? And if we do, how do we do that in a respectful way? Again, these are things to talk about early on and have some common understanding in the group. And I think most importantly, how do we hold one another accountable? In other words, how do we give feedback to each other, and in what way that's acceptable for us as individuals? So this has a lot to say with a team leader. And team leaders are about attending to both the individual needs as well as the interpersonal relationships between people, and at the same time attending to the accomplishment of the group's goals. So over time, as a group becomes more of a team, is more of what's called shared team leadership. Shared team leadership will not occur at the beginning of a group based on group dynamics. A group has to be together for some period of time, and this has to evolve into more of a team approach. A team goes through several stages of development, and as depending upon how complex the issue is, an ultimate goal is to share that leadership, but it typically does not start that way. Groups typically start with individuals and individual needs, and the moving from me to a we state of being. This is an example of a group that came together to help rebuild a park. And different people took on different leadership roles at different points in time for different purposes. So that's an ideal team that has learned how to work together. Several keys to group effectiveness as we think about leadership in groups. And starting off with helping the group to clarify its purpose and goals and expectations of each other, attending to how the group is structured as well as the processes that the group is going to use, getting to know each other well enough to know what the contributions are and acknowledging and valuing the contributions of each individual, helping to build the capacity of the group so that it can do its job, and being aware of those barriers and helping to address those barriers as they arise. And these will arise in terms of communication, in terms of conflict, disagreements that may escalate into conflict, and we have to think about how we work through those kinds of issues. Helping the group to develop a plan of how it's going to move forward and how to move into action and hold each other accountable as we undertake actions. And throughout all of this is attending to the group's relationships and sharing that leadership. So there were several resources that I used in putting this presentation together that I would recommend. And there's many good resources out there on the web. These are some of the ones that I have found most useful over the years and have referred to time and again. Thank you very much, and I look forward to you in another one of these segments.